Hello and welcome to Queers and Soaps. I'm Eric, joined once again by
Tim, hi guys.
bringing you some more Desperate Housewives, season one, episodes 4 to 6. Um, Tommy, roll the credits and we'll chat about it. All right, so this episode's titled "Who's That Woman?" It starts out with Lynette. Lynette is cleaning. She's all being full-time mama as always. She's not into her back to her job yet. I remember her going back eventually, but I guess it's later in the season. Um, and she gets a call from school. The twins got into some paint and they painted a girl blue. She gets to the school and she's not really happy with the teacher because like the teacher said she left it open for 5 minutes. That's plenty of time for kids to get into shit. If it wasn't her kids, it probably would have been some others. Um, so she gets a call, she goes in the second time. Um, And then like the kids are just running around and she has to like pry her son off the desk. I don't know which son's which at this point. They all both look the same to me. And I kind of forget their names. I don't know Porter and something.
Porter and Preston, maybe?
Um yeah, I think you're right, Preston. Later on, Lynette tells Bree about her kid issues. Nothing exciting happens there. Um, Paul goes to Lynette and Gabby and talks about Mary Alice. They tell her about the note at one point or they tell him about the note. Um, he says he tries to like make it up that she says crazy shit, like started writing crazy notes to him and Zach, that's his son, um, at some point, and they're like, "Oh, he's lying." Um, then Lynette wants to drug the boys to like, I guess, what is it? I guess it's is it like Ativan that like
No, it's
helps
Adderall or Ritalin. The boys had either
Adderall?
ADD or ADHD.
Yeah, because they're out of their minds. I feel like it might be just like a twin thing at this point because that's just what twins usually do. I feel like just get out of control. Um, so she wants to drug them, but she changes her mind and she just has some wine instead and lets them fly about the house. That's all I got for Lynette in this episode. So we do have a part before we get into Susan's story. Um, the ladies all listen to the Mary Alice tape together. And we find out her real name is Angela.
Hmm.
Um, I guess I'll get all this out of the way too. They meet later on with Paul to give Paul the note, and that's what I already had said that end part of that. He cries and leaves. Um, and they meet up, I want to say at the end of the episode to discuss Paul, and we find out he hires a detective to find out who wrote the note to Mary Alice, which led to her death. So go on with Susan's story. What you got?
Okay, so Susan, like always, is all over the place. She's watching Mike outside of her window, and she's trying to find a
Hmm.
way to talk to him.
He's
And
shirtless. You
suddenly
got to point
she's
out shirtless. We're queers and
well,
soaps
he
here.
was working shirtless, and he was a very muscled man. Let's just say that.
Got a
Julie, the
killer
daughter,
butt.
notices as well. Suddenly, Susan notices Edie is washing her car with bosom exposed, tight, um, buttoned up t-shirt, sponging herself, with the water. And
Sexy car
Susan's like, "What
washing.
do I got to do? I got to do something." She's, panicking. And her daughter Julie goes, "Mom, I had the perfect idea. I saved this piece of junk mail that came to our house for Mike just for such an occasion." She used to walk it over. She sort of foils Edie's plans. She starts talking to Mike. They talk about the mail was from an old, I guess, a movie marathon. Mike likes movies, so he invites Susan.
Classic movies.
Susan said she would love to go. Edie sort of throws herself in. Later on in the story, somehow Mike ends up asking Susan to go, and eventually, somehow in the story, Susan, to try and expose another part of the story I'll get to in a second, she invites Edie to go in her place. But what it is she has the neighbor goes to bribe her. It's Mrs. Hooper, I believe.
Martha Huber, yes.
Yes, she found a reason to come over. Mrs. Hooper sticks her nose in everyone's business. She basically brings a mincemeat pie to the door. That's this episode, right?
Yeah, it is.
So if anyone's ever had mincemeat, my family has it Christmas and Thanksgiving. There's no meat in the pie, but it's a bit of fruits, spices. It used to have meat, but the spices, like pumpkin pie spice or apple spice, would cover up the taste of the minced bits of meat.
I
And
never
there's this
had
expression, "I'm going to make mincemeat out of you," which is
it.
you're going to chop someone up little bits. But basically, Mrs.
Mm.
Hooper sort of threatens Susan,
Huber.
Miss Huber threatens Susan with the pie,
Yeah.
and
Well,
basically she tries to bribe her. She bribes her later in the story at the supermarket.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, Susan is at the supermarket, bumps into Mrs. Hoover, and then she makes a comment about Mike, and she says she needs help. Whatever it is, Mike comes over to come flirt with Susan. Susan sort of pushes Mike off to say, "Hey, I'm not interested," because she doesn't want Mrs. Huber knowing.
Right. She's
Mrs. Huber
nosy.
sort of bribes her and pushes her groceries up. She wants Susan to pay. So eventually,
Hmm.
Susan's being blackmailed in the story. And
Yeah.
later on, there's a phone call from Mrs. Huber that her water heater broke, and she
Mm.
wants Susan to pay for it. She doesn't know how she's going to pay for it, but she hints that she needs help. Call me back immediately.
Yeah, she leaves a message. I think it was $600, and she's like, I don't have the money for that. And
Yeah.
Susan's like, I got to do something about this.
So I think it was this story. Is this where they find a way to get into the house to get it? To get their measuring cup? Because Mrs. Hooper has a measuring cup.
Yes, it is.
It is. So basically, Susan and her daughter Julie figure out a way to try to get in the house to get the measuring cup. They're tired of being bribed by Mrs. Huber, and they're throwing frisbee out in the front lawn. And she tells Julie to go far,
Yeah.
and she throws it way over the house. Julie goes to go in, but since Edie's house burned down the last two episodes, Edie comes home early from something, wants to go inside Mrs. Huber's house where she's staying, and they're trying to keep her out. Basically, Julie sneaks in and steals the measuring cup.
Which is
So
how Edie ends up with the ticket
the
that
tickets
was
for
to
the
go to
movies
the
with
movie.
Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Susan
Wah,
trying to
wah.
stay all hidden and coy. She always fumbles everything. The poor girl. You want her to do so
Yeah,
well, but she
I know.
always, it's a mess. It's a hot mess. It's a tornado always with her. Um,
Yeah.
so I think, is that the end of her
And
story?
and Mike is so, yeah, I think so. Mike is so not interested in Edie.
No.
Like, I mean, I guess he just like messes, whatever, but like he's so into Susan, but like it's a shame to see Susan like have to push him away in this episode.
Yeah.
Um yeah, I think that's it for that one. So Gabby, um, she is creeped out by Paul, so they're dealing with Paul this whole time because it's the mystery of the season. Gabby is in the tub with John, taking a bubble bath. The cable guy comes and ruins their moment. She has candles lit and everything. It so looks like, nobody lights 100 candles when you're just having a bubble bath alone, usually.
And a silk robe and bubble bath. Yeah.
Hmm. John runs out, not knowing. I don't know if he knew it was oh no, he did know it was the cable guy, I guess. But he like whatever. He left his sock behind. He's like Cinderella. Um, the cable guy comes in. I don't know why he had to go to the bathroom. I guess the cable was in there or like something he had to do in there, but he slipped on the bubbles and fell. And the paramedics are there to take him away. And Carlos is home now at this point and seems suspicious. Like, this is probably the guy. And of course, this man is a sexy man. He's a hot cable guy. Um, what else? Carlos finds John's sock at one point and questions um, Gabby about it, and she says that it's the maid's. She digs in the hamper, digs out I guess a bunch of socks and throws them in the maid's cupboard or whatever. And she's like, "Oh yeah, she always cleans with socks." Even at one point, I think she like makes the maid wear a sock to clean like the railing or something. And he's like, "Did you always clean socks in Japan?" And she's like, "I'm from China." Anyway, she said oh yeah, she uses them as rags or whatever. And then I think she says to Gabby at one point, she's like, I don't like lying. And she's like, well, I don't like your ironing, so whatever. Oh, Gabby brings John new socks. I don't know if she goes to his school. I forget where she went. Oh no, to the field. Just so he doesn't wear like the same socks again. It was like a tube sock, like typical, like almost like 80s, 90s tube socks brought back to the thousands. Um, Carlos questions John about the cable guy. He's like, did you see the cable guy? At first, John's like, yeah. And then he's immediately like, no. I'm like, that doesn't look suspicious, you idiot. Um, and then he's like, did you lie for Mrs. Solis? And he's like, I don't want to get in the middle of anything, which makes it look like it's probably the cable guy. So,
Poor
Miss
cable guy.
John. Yeah, and poor John. Well, he's just a kid.
I
Like,
forget, is he 18 at this point? Maybe, maybe not.
I hope so. I'm really unsure of the age. It might come out later.
He's a senior in high school, we know.
Yeah, so he's probably, yeah, it's
I
on
was
the
18 at
verge.
senior year.
I hope. Um, Carlos goes to the cable guy's house and hits him. And then he looks around. He sees like a wedding picture and a bunch of gay magazines. He's like, "You're gay, aren't you?" And he's like, "Yeah, is that why you did this?" He's like, "Yeah," and then like leaves. Um, Carlos and Gabby are in the tub themselves later on. They see the news about the cable guy, and he's like, "You got something to say?" She's like, "No." So I guess that's handled for now, and that's Gabby's story. And you got Bree.
Okay, so poor Brie always tries to keep things together, always hides her emotions, guards them. She does that lots in this episode. Her and Rex talk a bit. I think they're
Yeah,
still
Rex is
separated.
back.
He's living at the
Yeah,
motel. The kids come home and end up seeing Brie cooking this big elaborate meal, lighting candles in the dining room. And they're like, "Where's Dad? He didn't come home last night." The kids actually talk to him. I think it's the son is it Daniel?
Andrew and Danielle.
Andrew and Danielle, right?
Yeah.
So Andrew ends up talking and says to his mother, "I already talked to Dad. I know he's staying out. You know, he's you're separated, whatever." She lied and said he's at a conference in Philly. We live outside of Philly. He wasn't here. Um, Danielle kind of makes a comment. Andrew storms out. Um, Gabby is kind of caught in the middle. She's trying to keep this perfect image, and it's cracking all around. Not Gabby, Brie.
Bree.
It's cracking all around her. You know, Miss
It's all
Perfect
good.
with the pearls. So Brie tries to find out where he is. He's not answering his phone. She tears through his room and she finds this card. And basically, it's for a nudie bar. I forget what the card,
I think
Tattletales,
it's
or
a matchbook. I think it's a
it's a
matchbook. Yeah, I
matchbook. Yeah,
forget what the
which
name.
I'm
Yeah.
sure they used to give out. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
So she decides she's going to go. She walks in. There are strippers, older men, and everything. And there is Andrew with his friends, looking up at the counter at a stripper, a female stripper, taking off an article of clothing and throws it through the crowd. And Bree sort of embarrasses him, calls out the other boy and says, one of his friends, "What a nice performance you did in the choir on Sunday at church," you know. She
Yeah.
tries to guilt him. He's embarrassed in front of his friends. So they throw some jabs back and forth, and their jabs are classic mother son. There's tension. You can sense
Yeah.
it. I feel that. She eventually convinces him to come out. She grounds him. She cleans his room.
Well, wait,
Um,
I like the one thing at the bar. Doesn't she say something about the stripper? She's like, "Oh, I wonder what she did, what led her here, like what
yes.
she went through." And then like the other guy at the bar is like, "You better get your mom out of here, lady," or Mister, or whatever. I
Yeah,
forget what he
he
says,
makes
but
some kind about her
that cracked
ruining
me
the
up.
feel of things. Like you're ruining the environment, the atmosphere, you know, the mood.
Right. Talking about them
Um,
like growing up. They don't
yeah,
like
so
to
they
think
go
about
home and
that
later
stuff.
they cut to her actually cleaning Andrew's room. He's grounded, and they throw lots of jabs back and forth at each other. Typical mother son, you know, butting heads. He's a teenager. Um, Basically, he also accuses her of stopping the moral authority. You know, we don't need that, mom. Just he basically wants her to be herself, to be normal. But Brie has to be
Right.
perfect, and everything, all appearances, even with her own kids,
Hmm.
has to be perfect. It's the White House, the white picket fence. everything behind that gate is perfect in Bree's world.
Yeah,
She's like Martha Stewart. No, that's
because
it. That's it.
she
I
took
wrote a lot about the club.
she took his door off too.
Oh yes, to give him no
Um,
privacy.
and he's like, "When do I get my door back?" She's like, "3 months." And they were getting along kind of better at the end of the episode. I know they kind of butt heads throughout the season, as I remember, but um, the next episode is episode 5 is "Come In, Stranger." Starts out with like, "Oh, this is you. You got Susan." So this is the break-in, the neighborhood break-in.
Oh, this was okay. So this is neighborhood break-in. Eventually, Susan, I forget where she was with Julie, but they come home. They see the house was broken into, her house,
No, no,
and
no. I think it's the neighbors because of the cat. She's cat sitting that neighbor's cat.
oh no,
So
I think
that's
she had the
the
cat at
house.
her house. Whatever way it was, is that she's neighbor sitting, she's pet sitting for a neighbor's cat. The woman went through an entire list of people she trusted, and Susan was the last one because Susan, God bless her, fumbles everything. She tries, she messes everything up, everything goes wrong. Murphy's Law
Of course.
applies to Susan. So she comes home from somewhere with Julie and she sees that it's either her house or the neighbor's house gets broken into, and there's a screwdriver left there. And this is why I think it's Susan's house, because she knows it's not their screwdriver. If it was a neighbor's house, she wouldn't know.
Oh, that's
Um,
true. Yeah, it probably is.
so
Okay.
she
So yeah,
notices
she
the
probably has it.
screwdriver. She calls the police. Eventually, they end up having a neighborhood watch, and it's held at, I think, her house. They talk about what to do. Officer comes. The officer's really friendly to her, and basically, he says something about, "We'll take this screwdriver and run prints." But you kind of get the idea he's sort of being nice and a little flirty with her. You can't quite tell yet. Susan eventually ends up going on a date with him. She's trying to ask Mike how you feel about me, all this stuff, and Mike is kind of, I don't remember if he's being coy or doesn't say things, but Susan goes on the date with the cop eventually, and he takes her out on patrol in a really bad area of town. There's hookers, drug dealers. You can tell it's Hollywood makes this nice movie set look a little trashy, but they put hookers on the corners. His shift ends. He kind of makes a comment towards Susan. Susan gets a little upset. He was kind of being a jerk to her. I think she found out he never ran the prints on the screwdriver. It was buried in his trunk.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they get in a slight argument. She feels betrayed. You just did this just to get a date with me. So she ends up leaving. He says, "Fine, you stay here. You walk home." But he leaves her in the bad part of town.
Yeah, he
So
ended up being a dickhead, unfortunately
yeah, he
for her.
did. Sadly. So she gets left where all the prostitutes are, the druggies are. She's walking the streets with the hookers. She's a funny interaction with the one hooker. She doesn't have her cell phone with her, so she ends up asking, "Can you make change for $5? You have $5 in quarters." And the woman said, "If I get paid in quarters, I'm doing something wrong." So she
Yeah.
says, "Here, take my cell phone. It's all blinged out with little bejeweled, like bedazzled
Well, remember,
gold.
2004 cell phones are like what little flip phones?
Little
I
flip
think that was
phones."
a
Yeah.
flip, and like the little tiny Nokias, like
Yeah. Crazy. And I remember all those. So she calls
yeah,
Julie for help, but Julie doesn't come. Mike comes. Mike comes in his truck. Mike comes to save the day, knight in shining armor. And Mike is a handsome fella. So I think in this episode, I don't remember if this is where they kiss or not.
I think so. I think he also messes with her too when he got there, was cracking me up. I think he said something like, "Oh, how much for the hour?" or something like the mess with her.
Yeah,
She's like,
there's
"Shut up."
lots of little jokes, and it's kind of cute. But you want Susan to have a happy ending. You watch everything go wrong for her, and she kind of creates her own mess. But you want things to go right for her. So
Well, yeah, I
I think
guess.
at the very end they end up kissing. Um,
Yeah. Is it the end of this one? It might be.
yeah, they kiss at this, and then um, she
Yes,
ends
you're
up
right.
asking, "What do you think of me?" He kisses her, and she says, "Can you repeat that?" And they kiss again, and that's the end
Yeah.
of their scene for this episode.
All right, so throughout this episode, we also have the neighborhood watch meeting. That's where the new hot cop was and all that. The ladies are all together. They clean up together, they kind of pair off, they talk to each other. This is just like when the four of them get together, but they mostly have their own stories, I feel like. Um, they hear Paul and Zach fighting as well, so they kind of look across to the house, like weird shit's going on over there. Again, the mystery of the season is why did Mary Alice kill herself? And they're just weird. Paul and Zach are very strange. We find out at one point that Mike is the one that broke in. He's talking to another guy. We don't know this man at the time. I guess I don't know if he's like FBI. We don't know if he's just like a private detective. So we know Mike is something. We don't know what. He talks to him about like possibly leaving the neighborhood. He's like, these people are fine. Like he's like, no, but unless you get busted, then we'll move. You'll move along, but you have to keep at it. Um, Ladies meet up later. The Zach says that it was his fault that his mother killed himself. And Gabby like mentions to Bree like, oh, why don't you? Well, she says like, you know, I forget what she said, something about Rex or whatever, and how do you, whatever, like basically like to manipulate Zach, into telling her more. And that's kind of it for that side story. And now I'll go into Lynette. Lynette talks to Bree while they're cleaning this stuff up. Um, she wants Bree to recommend the boys for bar club. Yeah, so basically Bree doesn't want her name to be tarnished because she knows how Lynette's boys are. So she's like, "You want me to lie for you?" And she's like, "Yeah, why not?" And she doesn't Bree say something like, "Well, I wanted my grandkids to go, to the school at some point." She's like, "Well, I don't care." Like she just wants her kids. Like she doesn't even care. Like, she's like, just get, like hook a sister up. And I think Bree actually does, which is nice because I didn't think she would. So Lynette and Tom have a meeting with the Barcliff dude, and he wants to observe the twins. And she's like, "Observe? Like, clearly, if you observe these kids, they're a nightmare." Um, so Lynette has her boys like do all of this stuff. Like, I don't know if it's right before the thing, but it basically is to wear them out. She has them like digging up a pool, like digging up stuff, running and running back and forth, just
Yeah.
like doing crazy shit. Um, so then when they get to the school for the observation, they're like, there's the
Zombie
one's
like.
like slowly doing a puzzle, and the other one's just like out of it. Um, Then Tom and Lynette talk later. Barcliff wants a $15,000 donation, and that basically whoever donates the money will
Gets
get
in.
their kids into the school, which I'm sure that happens in real life too. Um, and then he mentions like you want to maybe look into homeschool. She's like, "Are you nuts?" Like, no. Lynette tells Tom that she's like, "Oh, maybe I'll go back to work and then you can take care of the kids and all this." And he's like, "Oh, okay, homeschooled out. No, we're good." Um, but yeah, so that's the end of her story, and you got Bree.
So Bree through the whole episode trying to keep everything together, trying to keep up appearances, everything's perfect. At one point, her and her husband talk. It's very awkward. They're separated. He wants to leave because that magic is gone. She's controlling. She's overbearing. Everything is perfect. Nothing's ajar. Nothing's amiss. Um, she basically says that she misses him in so many ways, and he says to her, "You need to get used to being alone." And it kind of scares the heck out of her because she's not used to that. Again, that's not the perfect image for Brie.
Mm-mm.
She ends up visiting Paul at one point, and that's where she heard the argument. And she ends up inviting, when she talks to them, she talks to Zach. Zach enters the door. Zach seems a little bit nervous, but she somehow invites Zach to dinner at her house. She's perfect hostess. She's going to put in this grand dinner. And I think they talk about for the dinner, they talk about Christmas. I think this is where the Christmas talk came up.
Yeah, Mary Alice loved it.
She loved it, and she said, "Oh, I love Christmas. I usually like to make a new Christmas meal every year, but I make it earlier so I can perfect it before. Why don't you
Yeah,
come over and I'll try a new recipe I'm dying to try?" So she invites him over, and the door closes at Paul and his son Zach's house, and you see Paul on the floor with his lip bleeding. So we heard the argument earlier. You talked about it. Obviously, I thought the dad is a little violent or like verbally abusive.
hmm
You kind of see here the son is abusive physically, and
Zach.
you feel bad for him, but he's messed up from his mother dying. We don't know if it's before or after, but he's a little messed up psychologically from it, and you feel for
Yeah,
him.
I don't even know if it's from that or maybe he had psych issues before.
Yeah, it
I
could be
don't know.
before, and who knows? So fast forward to the Bree's scene. Bree and Zach with the dinner. They talk about it and everything else. Eventually, at some point, she's getting ready to make the perfect dinner. She has the turkey on the counter, the cranberries, stuffing, all these beautiful sides. She has, I think, the plates out the table set. And suddenly her husband calls and she
Mm,
drops everything for her husband.
this was
He
so sad.
basically, it was, I'm sorry?
This was sad. So yeah, I think she was like going to meet Rex, and like I think Zach was. He might have been like outside already,
He
right?
was coming to the door. So she said, "Oh,
Yeah.
honey, I'm so sorry, sweetie. I have to cancel. I have an emergency, but we'll do our Christmas dinner another night. We'll do it another night." Zach
And he
is, you
seemed
could,
so upset.
I know, and you feel bad because you want Bree to save her marriage, but you feel bad. Here is this, honey, Bree, you're an adult. You see this poor child, a teenager going through it. She doesn't know
Right.
all the other stuff. Her mother killed herself.
His mother,
he
yeah.
he's reaching out desperately for a mother figure, for some love in his life, and he doesn't feel it from his father. You kind of feel that tension. And Bree is so nice to him, and it's a perfect mother. So you can see he's sad. Bree goes off to Rex. I think, is this where they end up at the motel?
I believe, is it? Or is it the
So
next day?
maybe she doesn't, but she goes off to Rex, and Zach is all sad.
Yeah,
The
that's the
interesting
next
thing here
episode.
is Zach actually breaks into her house, but she doesn't know it yet. She comes home from wherever she is, and she ends up. Her, I think her and Rex came back. They come in and
Yeah.
they see that their house has been broken into. There's Christmas decorations everywhere, but they come up to their house. The police are already there because Zach got caught in the house and confessed everything to the police. He decorated the whole house for Christmas for Brie. And
It
hey,
was sweet.
why it's creepy, I put up a lot of Christmas decorations. I even do Halloween decorations. There's my Halloween tree. Sometimes I would like someone to break into my house and put up my decorations
Oh, for
so I don't
sure.
have to.
I would
So
have
it's
loved it.
awkward, but you can kind of see like Brie felt bad for canceling, and she in some way she feels attached to Zach. She wants to help him. So she basically tells the police not to press charges. Also kind of forgive him. Um, and I think that's it for Bree's scene. There
Yeah, I
wasn't
think
much
that's it
there. It was
for
just the
Bree.
interaction with Zach and the girls as usual and Rex. So I think that's it
Um,
for her.
so Gabby, we have a surprise visit from Carlos's mama,
Oh,
Gabby, who
Mama
I did look
Solis.
up. Guess who she is? You will never guess.
Who?
So first of all, her name is like I guess we say it Lupe Ontiveros.
Okay.
She was in a show called Pasadena. I always look up like the soap related things. She was in the movie Selena with Jennifer Lopez. She was in her first thing was a Charlie's Angels episode. But guess who she was in the Goonies? She was in the Goonies.
Who is she in the Goonies?
Rosalita, the the
Oh,
maid that
oh
Mal
yes,
Mal showed around. I was like, nah, that's Rosalita.
because
I
the maid
was
was
so
supposed to be
excited.
packing up the house, and she wasn't. The kids kept telling her to put everything away in Goonies. That was, I didn't even realize
Well,
that.
remember when like I think was it Corey Feldman's character Mouse was showing her around and he's like, "Oh, this is all filled with cucarachas and like all this horrible stuff."
Yeah.
And the mom's like saying all this nice stuff and she's like, "Oh, I'm so like she was like scared or whatever." But yeah, that's her. I was like, "OMG." So sadly she passed away in 2012, which actually apparently she was in another episode in 2012. So she acted straight up till she went.
Wow.
Yeah. Um So anywho, that is her mom, and her name's Juanita. So she visits. Carlos bugs Gabby about his mom there. He confides in his mom that Gabby is drifting away. He actually arranged for the mother to be there to kind of stay by her side and find out what's going on if she's cheating or not. I like that he cries and she slaps him. She's like, "We're strong people. We don't
We,
cry
we don't
over
do
our problems.
that.
We fix our problems."
Yes.
I like this lady a lot. I think she's in a lot of episodes too. I think she might come back. I forget what the situation is because I haven't watched it in 20 years. Um, Gabby gets a text to meet up with John on her little phone. Her mother-in-law joins her. So I guess she has to like sidetrack and do something with her. I think they go shopping. She takes her to like a store or whatever, clothes store. Juanita and Gabby fight in the store, and Gabby basically just wants to get laid, and she's like stopping her from getting laid, so she can't do it. She keeps checking her watch. She's like, and Juanita's like, "You got somewhere to be? Like, come on." While Juanita is distracted with her soap opera later on at home, Gabby goes to see John in the garage. Um, and he threatens to date someone his own age. She's like, maybe I should see someone else. Like, this isn't working out. And Gabby just wants him. I guess, she likes that young man and he can go at it as much as she needs him to. Um, and he also said, this would have like turned me right off. Like, once he said he had to save up 3 months of lunch money for the motel room, I would have been like, I can't date you. Like, this is just but Gabby has no problem with it. And she's pulling all the stops to keep it going, which is crazy. Because wouldn't you be like, maybe I'll take a week off, or a couple of weeks where I don't see him. Like if Carlos is like up your butt. Um, but whatever. Gabby and Juanita shop again. She runs out on her. Juanita gets busted for shoplifting. And she gets to meet John in front of I guess they're at the mall or something. Gabby tells Carlos that Juanita might be having like some memory issues and she forgot she put something in her bag and that's probably why she stole it
Mhm.
by accident. Um, Juanita ends up telling Gabby a story about how she got beat by Carlos's dad and she wasn't okay with it, but she was okay with that. But once he beat Carlos, she prayed hard enough that it wouldn't happen again. And she had told him or she told Carlos that he left her for another waitress or something, but she almost makes it look like she killed him and did something with him. And she's like, why are you telling me this? And she's like, I think you know.
Mama bear
So,
protects her cub.
sure does. Um, I think that's it for her story. Yeah. And then, um, oh, at the end, you did cover Brie already in this one, right?
We
Or do
did,
we still have
yes.
to do Brie? So at the end of this episode, I must point out that I think Brie was outside or something, and she sees Paul and Zach pull away in the car. We don't know exactly where they're going, and just Zach gives her like this creepy, like psycho look as he like pulled away. And that's it for that one. Yay. So episode 6, Running to Stand Still. Starts out with Gabby in this one. Gabby signed a prenup. Um, I guess it's Mary Alice is voicing over, of course. She's saying everything that Gabby did because of the mother-in-law, Juanita. So Juanita's still in town. She signed a prenup, got her house painted a different color that she didn't want it, and so basically, like Juanita's like a controlling mother in a way. Typical mother-in-law things. Sorry, mother-in-laws out there. Um, Juanita questions why they have a maid. She's like, she tells Carlos, hey, you're paying $15,000 a year for this maid. Why not have Gabby just take care of the house like she should be? Um, so Gabby, I think, kisses on Carlos and says like, and she's like making out with him and getting him hot and heavy. And she's like, well, soon I won't be able to do this because I'm going to be so tired from doing all these chores and cleaning all day and all this stuff. And Carlos, um, is basically like on his way out the door, and the mom sees him, and he's like, "Maid ain't going, she's staying." Just like, or Carlos isn't going to get laid, basically. Um, everybody, Paul's having a yard sale at one point. All the ladies, I think, are there. Um, Carlos is wondering what guy Gabby's cheating with because he still knows that she's cheating. Can't figure it out. Danielle comes home. I guess they're at Bree's house, maybe. Danielle comes home with John. Gabby's like instantly like jealous. and she asks Bree, like, "Are you comfortable with them going upstairs by themselves?" And what does Bree say?
Bree says, "Oh no, they're fine. They're in the abstinence club together. Good old John in
Abstinence
the
Club.
abstinence club. No sex before marriage."
And Gabby like spits her drink out. Like
Yeah.
what? Um, so later on, the ladies are playing cards. Gabby is like, "Oh, the guacamole made me sick," so she gets out of the game and she goes out. I guess John's outside because he's always around, because he's the gardener. So he goes. I think it's like her shed or something. I don't know what it is. Um, but Juanita, in the meantime, fills in for Gabby while she's gone, and she like makes the ladies put some money in. So she makes all this money from the ladies in the neighborhood. Um, Gabby asks why John was ignoring her calls, and he's like, "Oh, maybe we should lay off a little bit." Like he's really second guessing himself. We're not sure if he likes Danielle at this point. It's too early, but we don't know what's going on. Carlos tells Gabby Juanita had a gambling problem. So Gabby instantly is like, her wheels are spinning. She's like, all right. Gabby brings Juanita to a casino. And she's like, oh, I wanted to just eat at this restaurant here. They have good ribs or something.
I think it's
And she's
crab
like,
legs, like all you can eat
oh yeah,
buffet
crab
crab
legs. You're right.
legs.
You're right.
Yeah.
All you can eat crab legs. And then she said something like she has to go. Oh, she's like, oh no, let's just go to the mall or whatever. And then Juanita's already out. She's like, oh no, I wouldn't really get these crab legs. So you go, whatever. So Gabby's like, haha, gotcha. Only to find out later that Juanita had Carlos's credit card and spent the $15,000 limit at the casino. I like her face. She was just like, oh, oh. Yeah. Sue, it's almost over for her. Um, Juanita tells Carlos that Gabby isn't cheating. I guess they almost come to an understanding as she had lost $15,000, so it's like whatever. Um, and then she finds out from Carlos that Gabby knew about her gambling, and she's like, so basically that she knows Gabby set her up. Gabby passes John on the way home and just like brushes by him, and Juanita's just like, it clicks to her like, that's him. So now we know Juanita knows. She doesn't have full proof yet, so I'm guessing maybe Juanita might set her up or something. I don't know what's going to happen with that.
Okay. So we're gonna go back a little bit in the episode. It starts off. Susan's at the yard sale. Paul's having a yard sale, and it's a time-honored tradition in the suburbs. You kind of see what your neighbors are getting rid of, their decorations, collections, heirlooms, whatever. She happens to notice some of Mary Alice's things at the yard sale, like a bowl she won, or not won. Yeah, she won for her charitable work. Let's say at the hospital. And
The
Paul says,
fancy
"No, we
glass
need to get rid of
bowl.
this stuff. They're sad memories, and we need to start new." Um, they also put their house up for sale, which is why they're having the yard sale. So Susan ends up buying the entire box of all Mary Alice's awards and little collections for $10. But Paul says, I ran out of newspaper. Here, I'm going to wrap it in this old blanket. We see an old blanket with the name Dana on it. Now, Dana appears multiple times in the episodes. The box that got thrown in the lake had the name Dana carved into it with like little children's pictures on it. Like, I don't even know, circus stuff, whatever, bears, teddy bears, whatever. But
Hmm.
it all gets wrapped in a blanket that says Dana. That is
Another
not the
mystery.
son's name. That's not the mother's name. We found out her real name was Angela. So you're trying to
Hmm.
figure it out, right?
Who's Dana?
Um, she buys all that stuff. She talks to the girls at the yard sale or garage sale. Susan sees Paul again. She ends up questioning about Zach. I think there's no real answers. But she goes to a neighbor's house, and I think this is where she wants to borrow the car. It's Ida. Ida's been in the series. She's pretty early on character actress, but Ida, I forget what her last name
Yes.
is. She appears all throughout the series, and she's actually a big player later on. But she
Yeah.
goes over to Ida's house with eggs and says, "Do you remember how a year ago you borrowed 2 eggs from me?" She opens a carton of eggs, and there's 10 eggs. here in the US, they're sold 12 in a carton. She opens up and says, "Well, I need those 2 eggs back now." And basically, she ends up asking Ida if she can borrow her, I think it's van or something, or car. I don't remember
Right.
why she needed the car, but she ends up saying, "I need this. I lent you eggs. You should lend me your car." And Ida
Yeah.
reluctantly lends her, I guess, her minivan or mini SUV, whatever it is. I
Yeah.
don't remember why she lent that to her. So Susan and Julie end up finding out Zach is in a institution for a while. He needs some help. They decide they're going to go visit him, and maybe that's why they needed a minivan. They end up in the episode. They end up going to the institution. It's a psychiatric institution, and they sneak in. She says she's writing a children's book, I believe. So she wants to talk to one of the doctors. Not Julie. Susan is a children's author. She writes children's books, but she does illustrations as well. So I guess she needs the research. So the doctor happily meets her. Julie sneaks in and finds out where Zach is, and she talks to Zach. Zach is heavily medicated. Poor kid.
I
You know,
know.
he got arrested and everything else. His dad dropped him off here, and Julie is really concerned about him. She grew up with him. So she ends up asking if everything's okay. He said, "I don't know." He said, there's some memories I have, and there's someone named Dana that got hurt. She's talking to him, and a worker at the hospital or psychiatric ward comes in and says, "You're not supposed to be here." So Zach starts to confess that he thinks he hurt somebody, that he was the cause of someone's hurt or death or whatever, but he doesn't really remember. But I think this is where he may have mentioned the name Dana, but doesn't say a lot before Julie is kicked out of the room. So
Hmm.
Susan and Julie leave. Um, I don't think there was a ton for her in this episode.
No, she was just
Um,
stalking Paul and Zach. That mystery going on.
yeah, they have got that whole mystery. She tells the girls what happens. I think I wrote more about Gabby's story. Gabby's story was juicy. But Susan
It
wasn't in it
was.
much. So I think that's pretty much it for her. And then you have
Yeah, I feel like
Lynette,
they
right?
they they focus a little more on certain people sometimes.
Yeah.
So yeah, before I get into Lynette's story, so we have a guest star Sharon Lawrence, who we've seen many times, who plays Maisie, her I guess rival in this season 1. She was in New Dynasty, Devious Maids, One Tree Hill, 90210 was like one of her first things. She was in one episode in season 3. But she's had her own series. This lady, she's been in a ton of. She NYPD Blue. So anyway, she plays Maisie. And they're doing like a local, or I don't know, is it a school theater or a local theater thing that her
It's
kids
a
are
school
involved
theater.
in?
It's the school
The
theater. The
school
boys were
theater.
accepted into the school, and it's the school play, and it's Little Red Riding Hood.
Little Red Riding Hood, and she wants to like make it like a nice version of Little Red Riding Hood,
Yeah.
politically correct one. And Lynette's like, why are you changing it? Like everybody knows the story, like what's going on? And she basically, Maisie tells her, just stick to your own thing. She's like, oh yeah, what are you here for? Oh, she's like, oh, I have you for taking tickets. You do that. Whatever. So Lynette always has those good faces, like whatever asshole face. Um, Lynette later on says that she'll do costumes for the show. And she said, now that I'm more involved, how about we do Little Red Riding Hood the regular way? And the girls seem to back her up like reluctantly, like they're a little nervous with Maisie. I guess Maisie's like been in charge for a long time and they're afraid to stand up to her. So at one point, Lynette gets backed up with costumes. She's like, I don't know if I'll get them done. She's like, well, we can always cut the oak trees. She's like, my son are the oak trees. She's like, I'll figure it out. And Maisie's like, yeah, that's what I thought. So we have this other girl, Jordana, offers meds to Lynette to help her. Is this the Ativan one? Or this is
Yes.
the Adderall?
This is
Adderall or
well,
Ativan?
It's Adderall and Ritalin. So I think back then it may have been Ritalin, maybe it was Adderall, but she has a prescription for her kids, and she could not give it to her kids. She
Right,
felt
right. She didn't want to give it to her. She didn't want to drug her kids, basically.
yeah.
So she has a lot going on. She's got shit everywhere in the house, and she's like, you know what? She's just popping these pills. She pops them. She stays up for 18 hours sewing, cleaning, all of this stuff. She's out of control. Um, Later on, I guess she had made like a raccoon hat or something, and Maisie calls it like roadkill. And Lynette basically offers her out. She's like, "Listen, I had it. Let's fight. Take it outside." She's like, let's go, like seriously, let's go. And then like Maisie kind of looks at her and like, I don't have time for this, and then walks away. She's like, I didn't think so. And that's it for that story. And you got Brie.
So Bree's in this episode a little bit, not a whole lot, but she goes out to lunch in true Bree style, nice restaurant, drink a glass of wine by herself, mind you, and she sees her and her husband's marriage counselor because they're trying separation, everything else. They're trying to fix their marriage. Maybe it's a separation. She sees
Oh, we
him.
forgot
She
to,
talks
when
to
did they go to
him.
counseling? Did they go to counseling in the episode before this, or was it this one that they
They did. They
actually
went
did
into
that?
counseling in the first three episodes.
I think we forgot
And
to. Oh, did
that's
they?
where Gabby stole the tape. Not Gabby. Bree stole the tape that had
Right,
Mary
right, right,
Alice's name on it, where she confessed she was
right,
really
right,
Angela, and the nightmare about
right.
the poor girl and being hurt and whatever.
Gotcha, gotcha.
So she sees the marriage counselor at lunch, and she basically invites herself in, and she's figuring, I need to talk to him. I need to figure out what's going wrong. Rex said something about it's our sex life. So she said, our sex life is perfect. And he said, we're out. We're not in an actual session. And basically, Bree sort of guilts him, and he says, well, we'll treat this like a session. Basically, I'm going to bill you, but we're going to go halfsies on lunch. Like, you pay for your lunch, I'll pay for mine. Bree sort of butts in, and really quickly, it gets awkward. Bree says some things, and she talks about her sex life, but basically, he kind of hints that Rex says you're overbearing. You kill it.
Hmm.
Maybe you need like a sex counselor. I could recommend someone. I think they say that later. But
Yeah.
anyway, he asked for the check. They hadn't even ordered the food yet. They just had wine. So Brie probably talked to him for 20, 30 minutes, and no food was eaten. But he asked for the check, and like, sir, you didn't order yet. So Brie ends up leaving. She ends up, she, I think, talks to Rex about it, and they suggested the sexual therapist. Bree's not for this. Somebody would end up watching them and their activities to give hints, suggestions. The therapist can recommend someone good. But she doesn't like that. Later, she ends up um, seeing her husband. She meets him at the motel, I think, where he's
Mm.
staying. And she comes in a fur coat. You see Bree's pearls, as always, on her neck. And there's nothing on underneath but red, sexy lingerie and some heels.
Hmm. She
They
got
start
like
to get
a,
in
it's
the
like it's
moment.
almost looks like a bathing suit. Like it's like the red bottoms and the red little red
Yeah,
top.
it's a two piece.
Cute.
It's a bra and panties,
Hmm.
but it's very risque for Brie, I'm sure.
Hmm.
Brie,
Yeah.
she starts to turn Rex on. They go to do things. He's eating food, and she happens to look over. It's getting hot and passionate. She looks over and she sees the cheesesteak. We're from Philly. Cheesesteaks are a thing. She sees the cheesesteak on the end table next to the bed, and
Excuse
he's starting
me.
to drip and droop down, and she cannot focus. This is what the marriage therapist talked about. That
Hmm.
he said that basically she's always distracted. There's always something she's thinking about, and she's not focused on the moment. And
Yep.
they're getting hot and heavy, and she keeps reaching. And Rex goes, leave it. And Brie can't. She has to move it so it doesn't fall and create a mess. And she killed the moment. And you feel bad
Yep.
for her because I kind of side with Brie in a lot of things. But like, girl, you can get that up later. Like, enjoy the moment. Win your husband back.
Yes,
She
she
doesn't.
can't
He
for
says
some
basically,
reason.
this is
Yep.
what happened. This is why our marriage is the way it is. You have to be controlling everything has to be perfect. Like, it doesn't. Focus on me. Focus on the kids. And
Yeah.
that kind of ends her scene. She's not in it much at all.
Yeah, they do
And
talk
I
at the
feel bad
end.
for her.
They do talk at the end, right? And she's like, "What are you hiding?" She's like, "It's." She feels like she's not the problem. She's like, "I feel like something is going on with
Oh,
you." Like, remember
yes.
later on in the episode?
And I think this is where they mention the sex therapist because they talk
Yeah.
about bringing
So
someone in, and you just see Brie always looks shocked at everything because, again, everything's
yeah.
prim and proper, moral authority. She's the
Mm-hmm.
perfect. She's Martha Stewart. She's Martha Stewart of the
Right.
show. So that's not something you do. You don't invite people into your home to see your
Yeah.
problems. So I do feel
So
really
yeah.
bad for Brie in this episode. She's trying, but again, she's so hyper focused and everything being perfect that she destroyed even those little
Yeah.
moments with her husband trying to to reconnect. So
So how are you feeling about revisiting the series after all this time? Do you remember all this stuff, or did you forget a lot of stuff?
I remember things, and remembering how the series ended, I was like, "Wait, is this in this episode?" And then I realized, no, this is a season or 2 or 7 down the line. It's almost like that one character I talked about, I forget her name, the older character with the eggs in the minivan, Ida. Ida
Right.
starts off as a minor character, but she appears throughout the entire series, and she's a major
Hmm.
player later on. Just like all these other side characters, their stories develop. They become more integral in the script, and I love it. I love the one-liner jabs in the entire series between
Yeah.
Mama Solis and Gabby, between the
Mm.
woman at the play and Lynette. And I just love those little jabs. Susan, again, still a mess throughout the whole thing.
Oh
Lynette
no.
struggling to be a perfect mom, but again, she's got chaos around her. She is
There's been
the typical mother. I feel bad for her, you know?
I like when Edie heats up a little bit too, because right now, like, she wasn't even in these last two episodes.
No, she
She was only in
wasn't.
the first one.
She wasn't. And she
So
becomes a major
yeah.
player too later on.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because they always
And
show
she's
just
in
the
the
four women
credits.
in the first series or two, first season or two. But then you
Yeah,
see
because
other characters like Edie really comes on as like the fifth desperate housewife. I think by
I
the end of the series.
remember I remember Edie having a son at some point. So, and they don't even like mention him right now. So I'm like, I
No.
wonder if they didn't even have that in right now. I just was thinking about that because I remember him later, but I do remember them having like a weird relationship. So I don't remember when that is. I'm gonna say probably season three, but I don't
Yeah.
remember. Everything's a blur. I like revisiting it. It does crack me up, although their stories are good so far at this point. Um, I like it a lot. So yeah. So we'll wrap this episode up then if you have nothing else to say.
I think that's it. Yeah.
All right. Thank you to our Patreon subscribers. You're the reason we're here because we are on Patreon, this Desperate Housewives. So thank you. And thank you to all of our subscribers. Subscribe, like, and comment if you want us to do anything else. If you're liking Desperate Housewives, did you watch Desperate Housewives? I think it was just the 20th anniversary just passed for Desperate Housewives. 20
I
years
know.
old.
That's
Yikes.
crazy.
I know. So join the conversation and thanks for joining Queers and Soaps for today and see you next time.
See you
Bye,
next time,
guys.
guys.